And we're back. Man, we have a very special guest today, Admiral Robert Harward. Thank you for joining us, Bob.
Chris, thanks for having me.
100%. We have another special guest, Eric McMillan, the CEO of U.S. Arms Company, some of the most innovative ARs in the country, bunch of patents on them. Thanks for joining us, Eric.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Don't let that Southern accent fool y'all. He's pretty sharp guy, especially when it comes to engineering. And last but not least, our good friend Jeff Emde, our in-house CIA operative. Bob, I didn't tell you this before, but before Don Mann introduced us to Jeff, we would frequently be accused by people of being CIA shills. So we figured the best way to nip that in the bud is just go out and get our own CIA guy. The discussion we're having today is with regards to drones and the threats that they pose to us here in the homeland. Here's a bunch of links to stuff on X, essentially showing the drone warfare that's happening in Russia and Ukraine. This one was a couple days ago. That was essentially a drone that was crashed into its target. I think that's kind of a common thread with these things. A lot of these drones, so if you look in the middle of the screen where my cursor is right there, that's actually a little land drone, little robotically controlled tank, goes underneath this vehicle and blows it up. We're going to talk a little bit more with regards to this picture later on, but this was a vehicle with UN observers that was hit by an Israeli drone that was being controlled by AI, and it took out the wrong target. So kind of Skynet level stuff. The next aspect to this is the cartels using drones. This particular article references being used as mules, essentially. Not only are they smuggling drugs over the border with drones, they're also acting as guides, so they don't have to have a person who could potentially be arrested who's guiding invaders, illegals, whatever you want to call them, across the border. In the drug wars in Mexico, there's a couple articles that I have. Again, there'll be a link below to our website with a story that has all of these links to all these web pages. They're dropping bombs with them, the cartels, and they're attacking their enemies. Pretty crazy stuff when it comes to just the breadth of what we're seeing with drones. We've got Russia, Ukraine, we've got the cartels, and then in addition to that, we have intel, which we've shared with you guys previously with regards to the potential of terrorists to hit us with drone strikes here. Again, I've got all kinds of articles here with regards to the rising drone threat from terrorists, tech companies trying to play catch up with drones. This is actually leads to a PDF that's a really good read on non-state actors, so terrorists other than, say, Hezbollah, who's state sanctioned. Here's a pretty stark headline: U.S. is defenseless against a drone terror attack. And here's another PDF. Again, all of these will be at the page that's linked below. That's it for show and tell today, so that we can move on. Bob, we're going to go to you first. You asked me a question a few days ago when I thought that our military started using them, and I was off by about 4 decades. Give us the background from your side, Bob.
Well, Chris, I think it's important when we look at what's going on with drones today and what's going in the future, we understand the history and kind of where we got to today. I would say that the U.S. has always been at the forefront of technology and innovation, and with drones, that was the case. In the late 1950s and early 60s, the U.S. Navy first started flying drones off their ship. And that was driven by the necessity to deal with the Russian threat, the Soviet Union threat of submarines. They had amassed what we estimated to be 300 submarines at the time. And so the concept was to use a drone to deliver torpedoes and track submarines out at distance before they could get to the fleet. So what was Gyrodyne, Teledyne, working with the U.S. Navy, had an unmanned drone helicopter that was designed and flown to take torpedoes and drop them out so they could hit those Soviet submarines before they could get in range of our ships. Ironically, my father, in fact, was flying these off of his ships in the early 60s. And you can see it's a pretty complicated system, basically an unmanned helicopter modified and built to meet that mission.
Just out of curiosity, Bob, what was the range on the dash?
I want to say it was line of sight is what they were advertised, but 40, 50 miles at a distance where they could get out and hit the submarines before they could get their torpedoes in. And so how far could a sonar detect a submarine? How far could they get out and target it before it could get in range of delivering its payloads? And a lot of that has not changed. To some of the technology to expand line of sight, SATCOM allows you to get much further out. But at this time, these helicopters were limited to line of sights and the radar technology that the ships had. They canceled the program in the mid-60s basically because of the issues. If one of these drones, were getting them on the ship was a challenge themselves, they needed a crane, bring them on board while they were pierside. So if they had any problems and they had tech support on board, they couldn't get them off the deck. So it fouled the helicopter deck. They could not use it. So they ended up killing the program. And ultimately, the Russians moved away from their large-scale submarines, especially as we came on board with our attack nuclear submarines and other capabilities. So there's another example of where we dominated and won the Cold War. But if you watch that technology and it evolved, Chris, go ahead. You look like
I was just going to ask you, like, what came next after the dash? Like, where did the technology go?
There was a large gap. There was some experimentation, some unmanned stuff, but really nothing definitive. And what changed all that ended up being 9/11 and going into Afghanistan. When we went into Afghanistan in 2001, the mission was different. We were hunting down people, trying to find people separated from the civilian population. So drones came into use. And again, the military at the time really had none. Other government agencies, the US government had some, they were using them at a strategic level. And now we were doing tactical, if not operational missions in Afghanistan, where a lot of units wanted and needed the ability to see targets, see people, and see the landscape. And so the evolution really started then when we went in 2001 and we did not have any drones. We needed that capability. So we brought in Navy P-3s, a large aircraft designed to hunt submarines. So ironic is the drone that we used in the 60s was designed for submarines, and the first intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platform that we used in Afghanistan was built for submarines. So we could put a couple of our guys on the aircraft, leverage the cameras they had to watch people, watch our own troops in the field, mitigate risk, and track and know where these individuals we were interested were after. Shortly thereafter, we worked with the other government agencies. We leveraged their assets. They were willing to provide it to us when they weren't using it. And then we started our own acquisition and bringing on our drones to support that. And that became the prevalent tool in the terrorism fight in Afghanistan, because it allowed us to watch individuals 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, develop their patterns of life, and determine where best we could capture them and isolate them or separate at least from the civilian population. And we built a vast arsenal of those platforms during the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And in fact, we built up to, I believe, someone in the category of 50 or 60 orbits, which was the phrase we used to describe the ability to watch an object or a person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so while we were a lot of demands for that, we grew to that scale to be able to watch a lot of different people, a lot of different targets every day, any day. So you could determine those patterns of life, and more importantly, to watch and protect our people while they were conducting missions against our adversaries. So a tremendous success story. And even as we became set and really competent and well resourced to do that, we started moving into other lanes of drones. Unmanned land-based drones to look for IEDs. We even brought in unmanned helicopters to do resupply. So instead of having to put convoys on the ground where they were susceptible to IEDs, improvised explosive devices, which was a real advantage for our enemies, and ambushes, we could send unmanned helicopters to take those supplies and keep our folks on the ground. So as we came to the end of the war, both of those other forms of started coming into use. So you could see that evolution driven by the situation in Iraq and Afghanistan grow and build those capabilities. And then, just as the war ended, just like we did in the 50s and 60s, it kind of fell off the scope again, except for Ukraine.
In today's digital battlefield, your online survival is non-negotiable. Every click and every keystroke is a potential vulnerability. But fear not, survival friends. ExpressVPN will protect you. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Heaven, and I'm the CEO of Survival Dispatch. Our mission is to dispatch information so our fellow Americans and friends of America can survive in these very uncertain times. I've spent the past 30 years of my career with one foot in the server room and one foot in the boardroom. And one thing I've learned is third parties love to track you across the internet, compile data on you, and sell it to others. That's why I want to introduce you to ExpressVPN, your ultimate defense in the cyber war zone. With the click of a button, 100% of my browsing activity is rerouted through their secure servers, which not only mask my IP address, but also makes it impossible for my internet service provider to monitor, log, or sell my data. With top-of-the-line encryption, ExpressVPN fortifies your connection and restores significant anonymity, which makes you pretty much invisible to prying eyes. I personally don't go online with my phone or my laptop unless ExpressVPN is running. So don your digital armor, arm yourself with ExpressVPN, and navigate the online wilderness with confidence. Take control of your digital destiny and protect what matters most: your privacy, your security, your freedom. Whether you're battling data miners, evading government surveillance, or simply safeguarding your personal information, ExpressVPN stands guard, ensuring the best level of anonymity and security available. ExpressVPN is the ultimate weapon for your online survival, whether you're at home or in public using an unsecured and unencrypted Wi-Fi hotspot. Gear up and get protected today by visiting expressvpn.com/survival and get an extra 3 months for free. How much of this technology in Ukraine is ours? Is a significant portion of it came from America?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's more than just ours. I think it's the Ukrainians, a small nation, 28, 29 million people fighting the monolithic Russian Empire, brought on their innovation, their folks. They had requirements, they worked it. So a lot of it, sure, came from the US, but they were looking everywhere to bring that technology on board and give them the advantages they could rely on. So it was innovation on their behalf and all the partners who were assisting them, and the need. They needed something to address those requirements that would allow them to present offensive capabilities that were cost effective and very efficient on the battle space. So again, and the big change, kinetic. The preponderance of our drones in Afghanistan and Iraq were purely focused on intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. There were some drones that provided a kinetic capability, a standoff strike, but Ukraine changed that. Every drone became a kinetic tool. Not only could it be an ISR tool, it was a kinetic tool as well. And you've seen the advent of loitering munitions being a perfect example in some of the videos you just showed as well. So building those capabilities was, I think, a team effort, not just from Ukraine, but all the other people who add those capabilities and contribute and bring them to bear to help them in this fight.
In a prior conversation, Bob, you mentioned that there are autonomous drones being used in some parts of the world with AI that basically they're given a mission and say mapping out tunnels in Gaza or hunting down terrorists, those sort of things. How advanced is that?
Well, as well as I know, and I believe this to be a fact, the first use of AI on drones was small drones to ensure our guys were not getting killed. The preponderance, we suffered heavy casualties when not moving to a target, going into a target, clearing a building. So Shield AI developed a small quadcopter, outfitted it with 15 cameras and artificial intelligence algorithms that allowed it to go in and clear a building. Instead of a guy knocking in the door and coming in, they'd knock in the door and send the drone that could make those decisions: turn right, turn left, go upstairs, go downstairs, and do a map survey of the building as well as see anything in the building. And so I believe the first application of artificial intelligence on drones was through that mechanism, at least to the extent where the drone could make those decisions completely on their own. There were other drones that had some programming automation in it, but the intelligence part was the game changer. So that happened in 2017. That product was acquired by our special operations forces, has been used and acquired by other nations such as Israel, and we believe they are in use today in Gaza and through the tunnels where they're using them, because that was a capability they were designed to do. And we're starting to see that same application of AI applied to other drones, ones that are more operational, vertical launch and takeoff, such as the VBAT. You're seeing it fly on what were previously manned aircraft, but now flying with our artificial intelligence to further enable the pilot, if not do the pilot's job. So you're seeing this evolution move forward. And you're also watching other completely unmanned aircraft being built with that specific goal. Kratos has the Valkyrie. AI is flying on those platforms to provide it the ability to have longer range, more payloads, and operate without GPS and without comms, which will be a strategic imperative with those nation states that are able to deny the capabilities. So you're watching this evolution occur as we speak.
It's interesting that you went there. I was just getting ready to state that the scary part, depending on whose side of the equation you're on with the AI, is that you can knock out communications, knock out the radio waves, but if it's completely autonomous with AI, it can make its own decisions and doesn't have to, come back home just because it lost its link to the mothership. Pretty advanced. Jeff, obviously, Central Intelligence Agency, intelligence, one of the number one things that you guys did. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did Bob say a couple days ago when we were talking that the CIA had provided some, ISR, intel surveillance recon drones early in this process?
Yeah, I mean, we in Afghanistan, we had Predators and other drones, of course, but we also armed them. I think, we put Hellfire missiles on them because, it's nothing more frustrating than to see the guy you're trying to get and he just walks away. And so they were able to arm them, but I've heard stories that I probably can't repeat here, where they were actually providing fire support to special operations teams on the ground who would get caught in an ambush or something like that. And the Predator was circling above and was trying to guide them out. But then he ended up taking out an enemy machine gun position who was, it was pinning them down. And the funny part of the story was he says, he was telling the guy on the ground, I've got a Hellfire, I can take them out. And the guy on the ground said, where are you flying this from? And he said, actually, I think he was flying it from the parking lot in Langley, all through satellite links. And the guy was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that, because he was afraid he'd hit them by mistake. And then they kept taking more fire. And he says, yeah, go ahead. And, he took them out. But yeah, they were flying armed drones from the United States in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So the capability's been around for a little while now. That was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I think that's an important note, Jeff, that Jeff's brought up, that really what differentiates, just like that drone in 1950, currently the only recoverable form of kinetic activity was manned aircraft. If you fired a missile, you shot a bullet, you did anything, once you decided, it was gone. With a manned aircraft, previously, before 2001, that was your only means of delivering munitions that was recoverable. If you didn't use it, it came home. That's what is going to change with this drone warfare now. So the Predators, as Jeff talked about, was the only platform who could do that. Now you're seeing loitering munitions circling, doesn't need to hit till you want to, but that doesn't come home. You're going to see now with these drones the ability to make them kinetic and use, and if you don't, come home. That's a huge advantage, a much different capability. And the importance is that it reduces significantly your decision to hit and when it actually hits to a couple of seconds as opposed to minutes. If you're using a manned aircraft, close air support, he's got to be fueled, he's got to be lined up, he's got to be on target, he's got to have all that information. When you use a tool like a HIMARS, either ATACMS, which is the long-range missiles, or the rockets, you could watch a target and decide and shoot. But for the time that munition left till it hit was still a minute, 2 minutes away. But having an overhead drone with the ability, you make that decision, it's going to hit 2 seconds later, ensures collateral damage, separation of target, safety, all the things you need to ensure that munition is being delivered as quickly as possible without any of the other ramifications you can be concerned about. So that's one of the real unique challenges and differences with drones and kinetic capabilities.
Yeah, and the concept is not new. If you look at our nuclear triad that we've had forever, you had the seaborne, for the attack submarines, you had ICBMs, but you also had bombers. And of those three, only bombers were recallable. You could fly up to the point where you needed to, and then if it turns out the situation diffused or whatever, you could bring them back. But for any missile system, once you push the button, it's pretty much gone, and then you've made your decision. You can't call it back. They're just doing it with drones instead of having people on board. You're just doing it with a drone.
So Eric, we've got Bob's perspective from the Navy, the military. You've got Jeff's input from the CIA side. All of this technology now, though, is getting distilled down to economical options that private citizens can buy, that terrorist organizations can buy. And this is, from an engineering standpoint, this is your wheelhouse. Give us an idea of how that technology is now distilled down to the point where somebody can go and buy this stuff and attack others with it pretty quickly.
It's pretty straightforward. It's consumer grade drones. That's the bottom line. DJI and some others offer this. You're able to commercially procure any of these things, some of which can handle heavy payloads. There's some agricultural drones out there. There's some fly carts out there, and they could be weaponized in a number of different ways. I don't want to get into the weeds of how that can be done, but the opportunity is certainly there, and the technology exists. It's attainable by the public. Any individual within the community can purchase this, and they can employ that in a number of different ways, whether it be strategically or openly, whether it be publicly at a public event, or just very strategically down to an individual. It's a very scary situation, knowing that the technology that they've been using in the military has now rolled over and available to the consumer.
So in 2019, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard used the drone swarm technology from Hollywood. So essentially the software where one operator can run multiple drones simultaneously. And it was originally written for light shows, but they sent 20 of them towards Saudi Arabia, attacked their primary oil production facility, knocked out 5% of the world's oil production. Give me a ballpark number. What would it cost a bad guy to put together a fleet of 20 drones that was capable of dropping a payload, say on an open air venue, which we've discussed on Survival Dispatch News, whether it's aerosolized anthrax, aerosolized fentanyl, or like Bob saying, something kinetic in nature? I mean, we're not talking huge sums of money here, are we?
No, we're not. And we're talking about stuff that can be procured from Walmart. So we're talking 5,000 or less in US dollars.
Wow. Okay. I didn't expect it to be that low. I thought you were going to come in a little bit higher than that.
No. Yeah. With some creativity, you could certainly use Walmart drones to get that done.
It had something like fertilizer, those sort of things as a payload.
10,000 or less US dollars.
Wow. Okay. So you caught me a little bit off guard there. That's pretty small. I mean, Bob, give me an idea. Let's go back to Afghanistan. What was our investment in one of those drones? Are we talking hundreds of thousands, millions, like ballpark?
Tens of millions.
Tens of millions. So we've got.
Eric raised a great point here, where we originally talked about the evolution through the defense lane. You know, the DASH, deployable, the drone anti-submarine helicopter, through Afghanistan into Iraq, and now what's happening in Ukraine. At the same time, that evolution and innovation and just commercial use and the civilian market has been just as quick and as impactful. As he said, DJI, Amazon, how do we deliver packages? How do we deliver goods? In the commercial industry, where we have pilot shortages, how can it help a pilot? So maybe you only need one in a cockpit. That technology and that innovation and that thought is moving forward at great speeds. So both of those are dual use for good activity as well as bad activity. You know, oil companies to do surveys of their pipelines and their oil rigs, power to look and survey their windmills. I know in rural areas in Wyoming, where you've got to drive 40 minutes to go read a power meter, a drone now can do that. So this evolution and this implementation of technology to meet both those commercial and defense needs is unabated. And so in Afghanistan, with these initial costs, when we were buying these large systems, they were tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, not just for the platform and stuff, but all the infrastructure, all the manpower, all the maintenance and all. And so that's one of the biggest changes, where you can now take a vertical launch, takeoff and recovery drone, a VBAT per se, that Shield AI produces, launch that, fly at 20,000 feet for 10 to 12 hours, and you don't need a runway. Two guys open up a box, put this thing together. You now have a tactical asset, at least in cost, application, and use, with operational, if not strategic, impact. So this the same thing philosophy applies to all drones. How cost effective can they be? How can you mass them? How can you do this cheaply? And the technology is not that sophisticated, at least for remote control. And I think this is where artificial intelligence really makes a difference. It allows you to do mass. It allows you to operate into anywhere at a very cost-effective measure that was not available before.
So very, very low barrier to entry is essentially what I'm hearing. You know, so not surprising that the cartels and terrorists are using drones because of that low barrier to entry and all the different things that you mentioned. I can't remember who brought this topic up previously when we spoke yesterday, but what happens if a drone flies into your backyard? Can you shoot it down? I think I know what the answer is because we discussed it, but I'd like our audience to hear this. One of you guys want to take a run at that?
I'm familiar with the FAA policy, so if you guys don't mind, I'll speak on this. So a drone in America is supposed to be registered if it's over 0.55 pounds. And that being the case, it is considered an aircraft. So it is governed by FAA regulations. Therefore, if you shoot at it, you are technically shooting at an aircraft. So the answer to that is no, you are not allowed to shoot it out of the air if it approaches.
We did a recent episode of Survival Dispatch News on burglary tourism. So there's been this advent of gangs from Central and South America coming here, targeting wealthier individuals, break and enter, and then take all the spoils back to the country they came from. They're not moving here because they want to be part of America. They're just kind of hit and run. And when I was looking for links on the subject we're discussing today, I actually ran across those burglary tourism, purveyors, for lack of a better term, using drones to case high-end homes before they perpetrated a break-in sort of thing. So the usage scenarios are phenomenal. So one of you, three of you here, maybe take a run at this. What's the advice for the average person? Let's say somebody's at an open air venue, football game, concert, drones, they see drones coming in. We saw this last year with a drone coming into the Cleveland Browns stadium, and everybody just stood there and stared at it. And it was 2 weeks after the attack in Gaza. And if that drone had been, paragliders, everybody would have run for their life, but they didn't. They were kind of frozen. But I think we're getting some more awareness on drones here. What are the recommendations? Bob, you go first, then I'll go to Eric and Jeff. So advice for Survival Dispatch's community and audience here.
Well, I think number one is just situational awareness. I think he's given some great vignettes and illustrations of why this is important. And to this thing, it's more just an entertainment value. When I live in a neighborhood I'm here in right now is a rather nice neighborhood, and I've heard drones over them, small drones. You can hear them whizzing around, but sometimes I can't see. I've seen it once or twice. But after that, I don't know what to do with it. Do I report it to the police? What are they going to do about it? Do they know it's flying in the bin? There's really no solution. So number one is just to be aware of it, the threats it poses. One, just the flying into you. But as you said, maybe it's being used to case. Maybe it's used for some other activity. And going down the line, while I'm not aware of any attack using a drone in the United States for malicious activity, much less criminal or terrorist intent, that is in the range of possibility. So I think it's important that we all realize that, be aware of it, enhance our situational awareness, and notify or inform others of the same. As we watch this evolution and where this is going to go, it's a concern, but I know I have no other solution at this point, especially in urban environments where it's going to be hard to track or bring down these aircraft. So it's a problem.
Yeah, I guess so. Eric?
I think Bob said it best. Situational awareness is probably key to this. My advice would be, if you're in an environment like that, especially a public environment, that situation could be a test run of something to come in the future. It's probably more benign than that, more entertainment, as he had mentioned. But my advice would be to, with the situational awareness, separate yourself from any exposure that you may have. If you see something like that happen, get up from your seat. Go to a place that might be a little safer. If something does happen, then you're not hung up in a panic, which that could become very problematic for self-preservation. And if you can exit that situation, that ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure, scenario, if you could exit that and put yourself in a safer position, and then let the threat pass, whatever it be, being a threat or not. And then, your actions going forward would be in regard to what is happening with that drone in that situation.
Fair enough. Jeff?
Well, yeah, echoing what they said, and I think Eric hit on something, is if there's an issue like that and you think it might be a problem, leave sooner rather than later, because as we've discussed before, okay, we're at a kinetic issue, kinetic attack, that's going to drop a hand grenade or something like that. The damage from the hand grenade or whatever they do is probably going to be a lot less than the damage from the ensuing panic. You do it at a football stadium, there's 60,000 people there, and then a bomb goes off. Well, they're all headed for the exits. You're going to have more people trampled to death than you probably would from the explosion itself. So if you're ahead of that curve, you don't want to be the guy in the middle of the mob. You want to be the guy in the front, to get out of there quickly. But you also got to consider that most of these things are going to be benign. Realtors use drones to take photos of houses. There's kids who just play with drones because they're fun. There's the power companies inspect power lines with drones. It's, they're going to be ubiquitous. And when, Amazon has been threatening drone delivery of packages for the last couple of years, when that happens and becomes regular, people are going to start ignoring them. And that's a bigger threat because, there's a drone, you don't need to pay attention to it anymore. And I think, you think about Amazon delivering packages to your house. They probably come 3 times a day if your wife's like mine. 10 years ago, you would get a delivery at your house once a month, maybe once a week. So a delivery truck, you noticed now between FedEx, Amazon, UPS, you don't even notice them anymore because they're every 5 minutes and they're everywhere. That's because, we're tamping down our awareness, and that's going to be the problem.
I would just summarize what you guys have shared so far. Always go back to Jeff Cooper's, combat mindset, and that when you leave home, at a bare minimum, you should be in condition yellow, paying attention to what's going on around you. Don't be in public in condition white where you're not paying attention to anything. Run for deep cover. If you saw a swarm of drones that are being aggressive in nature, let's say dropping kinetic weapons or anything like that, the deeper the cover, the better. I've seen some videos out of Ukraine and Russia where somebody's run inside a building and the drone followed them into the building, and then it was a kamikaze drone and just detonated itself. So, and we've seen pictures of the guys, the soldiers running around a tank with the drone chasing it, and then when it catches up, it just, again, kamikaze detonates itself and takes the poor guy out. So run for deep cover when you see a drone. Somebody mentioned share that information, like calling 911. I know the answer to this question, but I want everybody to take a crack at this as well. What's your recommendations as far as shooting a drone down is concerned? It's in this instance, not somebody just taking pictures, but let's say a drone that's attacking people, dropping weapons, kinetic or otherwise. Can you shoot it down? Like physically, can you shoot it down? Not legally, physically. Bob?
Very, very challenging.
Yeah.
It's a challenge, but I'm more concerned about the collateral damage. I've been in a situation where we shot something and that bullet ended up where it wasn't supposed to go. So in an urban environment, you can't risk that unless it's the imminent threat to you. Now, a young kid, I had a Diane pellet rifle, short range, not a lethal threat. I think I got in trouble because I shot out a street light with it. If you're my home and one of those things are flying and I'm concerned about it, but it's not imminent threat, that may present an option to you. But I think at the end of the day, there's going to have to be some form of, as these become more prevalent, some signature to that drone. So visually, you can identify who it is, whose it's belong, and who's accountable for it. But right now, I would steer away from any sort of, unless it's an imminent threat. And we've not had that situation occur. So we're going to have to watch this, innovate our defensive applications and uses and how we're going to deal with this going forward. But I don't know any really acceptable solutions at the moment.
Fair enough. Eric, what are the chances of somebody whipping out their AR and shooting down a drone?
I'm with Bob. Don't take the risk. You're accountable for their projectiles, and those things are. I know we've all tried to shoot at birds, and it just doesn't happen. And these things move. And Bob had touched on something: having some sort of registration, some sort of identification. On an aircraft, talking about airplanes and helicopters, we have here in the U.S. what's called an N number. It's a registration number. Those numbers have to be a certain size, a certain height, a certain width in order to be on the aircraft so that it can be seen. These things are so small, even with a registered number on it, it would be impossible to identify it without binoculars or some sort of ocular system to enlarge. This is challenging, truly challenging. In my opinion, I would not risk shooting at it. Again, I would fall to the flight or fight, and I would prefer the flight over the fight, and cover. But again, that brings on a whole nother set of variables here. These drones have thermals on them. From thermal. You have to get behind some sort of insulator, whether it be a glass, whether it be a wall. Well, when you do that, now you have created an environment to where you are inside of a place that can be a dedicated target. And these things with inertia, right through a window, and then they're in there with you. So there's just a lot of challenges with the whole drone thing. I don't think that there's one good answer. It's just use common sense, awareness, and avoid them if you can.
Yeah, I agree. It's very difficult the concept of even shooting one down. But Bob, when I want to say around 9 or 10 years old, I shot a bird on the neighbor's property, and they promptly came to my parents and got very upset about it. And I got my gun taken away from me for a little while as a result of that.
Was it a bullet or a BB gun or a
BB gun?
Pellet?
Yeah, BB gun. Yeah,
that doesn't present a life-threatening weapon. So, but to a bird at least, not to a human, hopefully.
So that was the little feathered darts that you can use in pellet guns. That was one of them, and I still lost my gun from it, and I didn't get back for quite a while. But and I'm not claiming that I'm capable of shooting birds out of the sky or anything like that. I will mention one thing that we've covered a number of times on Survival Dispatch News. Even if the wheels come off of everything, like we're in complete anarchy and chaos, and you indiscriminately shoot your weapons and injure or kill somebody, eventually there will be a reckoning for everybody. And to keep that in mind, nobody's getting a free pass on indiscriminately shooting somebody else or murdering them just because the rule of law is temporarily out the window. Bob, I'm conscious of your time, so I'm just going to throw a couple quick things. I'd like to hear a little bit more with regards to your book that's going to be released here shortly. So some other notes that I have here are stay abreast of breaking news. The best source is X, Twitter. Stuff occurs many hours and days there before it hits normal news outlets. And if you're going to follow people on X and other platforms, try to follow the truthful ones and not the ones who are, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. Go to nextdistro.org, pick your state, and get your free Narcan. So if aerosolized fentanyl is used in a terrorist attack delivered by drones, that you have something to treat yourself with. And Bob, I will ask you one question before we go to your book. What's your opinion on the importance of people improving their conditioning level if they so happen to find themselves in an SHTF scenario?
Yeah, Chris, first off, I talk about this in the book a little bit, but your most important bank account is yourself. How well do you take care of yourself? I want to go for the long haul. And so I was fortunate enough to have a career where they encouraged us to take care of ourselves, physically develop. So I recommend to everyone take care of themselves physically, mentally, every way you can. I was always a big proponent and enjoyed the physical development because I saw it as a bank account. Every time I spent an hour working out, it was a deposit in my bank account that pays big to me, and it always made me feel good as well. So I enjoy it, and I just recommend to everyone, take care of yourself, and your friends. And I enjoyed being with my friends doing physical training more than I enjoyed being in a bar drinking. In fact, it always made me think of the adage, why do people drink? Well, mainly to make other people more interesting. And when you're sweating together and working out, you really got to get close with your friends and colleagues. So, but thanks, Chris. I think it's a critical component of your well-being.
Well, I heard through the grapevine, our mutual friends at Unit Solutions, that you were on their advisory board at one point in time, and you got to the end of a meeting and you told everybody, okay, we're going to do PT now because this is how we bond. That's the first board member I've ever heard of doing that. It's fantastic stuff. So before you leave us, Bob, tell us about The Gouge and your book that's coming out here in June.
Well, very kind of you, Chris. Thanks. The Gouge the book is about the history of the gouge, what it means, and why it's important to any team, organization, and really in society today. My success and everything I accomplished in life really wasn't because of me. It was because of the people I worked for and with. They were focused on making me successful, and they went out of their ways to do that. And my father inculcated this concept in me. So I hope I always contributed and made the people work for me as successful as they could be because they did that for me. And that's what the book's about. And it's the history of it, where it came from. It's a prominent military term. And then it's vignettes that illustrate why it is important and why I think everyone needs to consider thinking that way.
Yeah, so just in layman's terms, the gouge essentially means like the skinny, the scuttlebutt, what's really happening behind the scenes, right?
The information, it's the experience-based information that's going to help you be smarter than any situation you're in. So that's a fact. But more important than that, how do you get that? Who are those people you trust and believe in? And how do you build that trust and belief in others for you? So it's broader than just the inside skinny. It's what got you there, how you got that, who knows that experience, and how you build those networks. But more importantly, how do you proactively work to help others be smarter than the situation they're in? I consider kind of your contract with humanity. And today, in today's world, I think we can always use a little more of that.
Yeah, well said, Bob. Jeff, I'm going to go to Eric last, but you've written a number of books as well. So shameless plug. Tell us some of the books that you've got out there. Some of them you've co-authored with Don Mann, who was a SEAL with the Admiral. It's a world.
Well, one that we did was this one, History's Assassins. It is it's a look at political assassinations throughout history, but we look at it from the perspective of the assassin, in that what were they trying to achieve? You know, how do they intend to do it? And in the end, did it actually achieve their goals? And it starts with Julius Caesar and it goes all the way up through Gandhi. The other one we have, I don't think I have it handy here, is it's a fiction book. It's a novel called Black Sun Rising. It's basically about a privately funded counter-terrorist unit that can go anywhere in the world and go after anyone they want with no restrictions. So it's kind of a fun book.
We could use a few teams like that at our southern border right now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Eric, you're batting cleanup. U.S. Arms Co., the best of the best for ARs. I can say that. You graciously built one for me. It's an amazing SBR. The quality's unmatched. Where do people find you online, and why should they buy ARs from U.S. Arms Company?
www.usarmsco.com. That's our website. We're bottom line, hands down, the world's tightest receivers. We don't get wear in our receivers. We produce a very, very accurate gun at a very, very economical price.
Well stated. Bob, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I know you're a crazy busy guy. Safe travels. I know you're off to deliver a speech this afternoon. Jeff, Eric, appreciate your time as well. Be safe, y'all.
Thank you.